Welcome to Northwest Beer Chronicles, because beer works. My name's Tom.
I'm Paul.
And we're here tonight with our inaugural episode with Kevin here at Northwest Peaks Brewing.
Hey guys, thanks for coming in.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So, how did you start brewing?
I was pretty much this time of the year, like 12 or 14 years ago, I got a Christmas gift. And it was a homebrew set back in 98 or so. And my parents got it for me, and I started homebrewing. Fell in love with beer. That was right when I was graduating from college. And just kind of picked it up then and expanded the system. And I don't want to say the rest is history, but you know, I kind of gradually increased my knowledge of beer making and home brewing, and eventually ended up here.
So what was your first beer?
My first beer was a recipe that I found in a book. It was not the normal homebrewing book that everyone uses, but just random brown ale. I thought a brown ale would be nice. A lot of flavor in there to kind of hide anything wrong that I did in the beer.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's kind of like when I tell people to start homebrewing, stouts and IPAs, because there's so much there. If there's any...
I can hide a lot of
IPA
errors.
is pretty forgiving.
Yeah. So that was my first beer, and it turned out pretty good. There was no major flaws in that.
Major flaws. Perhaps a few minor ones. My first beer had lots of flaws.
My first beer was perfect.
I'm certain it was.
So you started as a CSA. How did you come about that model?
For the brewery I did, it was actually, I'm really into kind of the local environment, the local vor, and I like to support the local industries, especially agriculture. So that's what the CSA is, community supported agriculture.
Yeah.
And without going into a lot of detail, a lot of these smaller farms need money when they're planting and have to repair the farm equipment in the spring, but they don't have any bounties till the fall. So you prepay for a portion of the agriculture, the vegetables.
Sorry.
And then
should have probably turned this off.
I probably
teething
might
issues here.
get a meeting. Yeah, call.
Note to self, everybody turn off the phone.
Rule 1 of the beer blog: turn off your phone before you start filming. All right.
You want to ask them the CSA question again? Give a clap before you do.
Yeah. So CSI.
So yeah, I started, kind of taking. I'm a local vor. I like supporting the local environment and the local community, and especially in the agriculture, the local farms. Get my produce from people around here, and so I joined a CSA, or Community Supported Agriculture, and that's where the farms need money up front in the springtime when they're planting and fixing farm equipment, and so you prepay for a portion of the vegetables that are going to come out of the farm throughout the growing season. And I started this as in a similar vein where it's a community-supported beer, so I call it a CSB.
Yeah.
So it was a subscription program, so people would prepay for a year or 6 months or whatever duration of beer, and it would be kind of a growler of the month program. So I'd do 2 different beers a month, and the subscribers would get first dibs on either one of those beers, and they would get a growler of a new, unique brew every single month. And so it's a way for me to start up and get some funds to start the place before I really had to put that much personal investment into it, so I can get some funds in to help set up the brewery. And also I could target kind of different beers and kind of make that a selling point where you're going to get different beers every single month.
So all of your beers are seasonal right now?
All the beers are seasonals. We have started doing more consistent brews. So we're trying to pick some of the popular ones and just do those year round. So we've got a pale and a red that we're trying to do that with. So yeah.
Not to get off topic, but let's talk about the beers that you have on tap right now.
Okay.
You want to take us through them?
Sure. So right now we've got actually 3 of the beers that are on tap are from the CSB program. So whatever's not filled in growlers and sent to the subscribers gets put in kegs and put on tap. And then we've got our red, which is more of our consistently produced beer. So that's the Readout Red, which is on the left here. So the Readout Red is the first one that you've got here.
Already started a little bit on mine. I'm impatient.
Patience is a virtue, except when drinking.
And so that one's more of a unique red. It's kind of a crisper red, a spicier red. It's still hop forward, but not the citrus hops.
It's like a little Simcoe maybe in there? Or
no Simcoe. There's Liberty and Hallertau, so more noble.
It goes the finishing at,
and then the Columbus is actually what gives it the a nice citrus, spicy character to counteract with the noble hop character of the Hallertau.
Definitely a little more interesting red than you would typically find on tap.
And we're getting that comment a lot, and so I think
it's a West Coast red, meaning there's hops in it.
There's hops in it, but it's not the citrus hops, and so I think it caters to a lot of different palates where there's a lot of hops, but they're interesting hops, but they're not.
It seems super bitter,
and it's not too bitter.
It's not like IPA, West Coast IPA bitter.
So all around, I think that's been a very popular beer here, which is one of the reasons why we've continued to produce it. And made that one of our mainstays throughout the year. So
yeah, I can see why. I mean, at a lot of breweries, it seems like the red is sort of an afterthought. It's like the beer, like maybe the beer they don't care about. It's like, okay, it's not an IPA.
That or it's the gateway beer.
It's a gateway beer, yes.
But this is a gateway beer with interest rather than just your typical one.
Right. So, and then the last 3 are have been on the CSB program or the Mountain Beers Growler of the Month Club, however you guys want to term it, and this is the Bluet, which was one of our beers for November, and that was kind of a theme month, and this was named after Bluet Pass over in Eastern Washington, in tribute to the Eastern Washington fires that were prominent all summer long. So it's a Scottish base, 4 3/4% alcohol, and then 10% was cherry smoked malt, so it gives it a nice smoke character, but not over the top smoke, and it's not kind of pungent like a peaty smoke.
Yeah, it's definitely not overpowering. It's not like a Roch beer or something where you could eat it like a meal. I feel like I could actually drink a whole pint of this.
And no peaty. It's not like a lowland Scotch or something, which can just be overwhelming for some of us.
Yeah. So, and then
really nice.
So the third one actually is a kind of like a pecan pie in a glass. Again, November beer for Thanksgiving, and we want to do one spice beer, but not make it a pumpkin spice. So we did a pecan pie. So it's a nut brown base, and after trying the nut brown base, I really wanted to leave everything out because I really like the nut brown. But we went forward and put a little bit of pie spices in it and some pecan character in it. So you've got a kind of a subtle pecan in there, and then a little bit of spice on top of the nutty brown.
A lot of these pumpkin beers I've had, the nutmeg in particular, it becomes really overpowering. But this one is just a nice hint of it.
Yeah.
So, and again, it's more of a lighter beer. We're trying to stay on the lower alcohol, so it's again 4 3/4% or thereabouts. So
actually believe it a true session beer.
Trying to, yeah. So almost all the CSB beers are less than 5.5%, and we're even doing a dark mild for January after all of the heavy hitting winter beers, and that's going to come in at about 4%.
Nice.
So maybe not even a true mild. But
It's nice. It's nice to see some interesting lower alcohol microbrews. You know, a lot of them skew towards the really highly alcoholic, which are good. But
how do you make it more flavorful? Put more stuff.
There's definitely been a trend lately towards imperial everything.
Imperial, which is nice. I do like them, but it's great to see interesting smaller beers too.
Certainly more of a challenge as a brewer to make something with a lot of flavor with a simpler malt bill.
Yes. So, I mean, and that's really what I've been going for. In our first, I don't know if we're going to get into this later, but our first brew system couldn't handle a lot of grain. And so the mash tun was kind of undersized, so we were kind of playing with we had to work with
what you had type thing.
Exactly, but I kind of embraced that, and I'm really enjoying trying to do lower alcohol beers, more sessionable beers with flavor, especially since we're doing a CSB with growlers. Yeah. I don't want 9% beer in growler.
Yeah, exactly. Make somebody crack a growler.
I understand your plight at home. If I'm making a 5-gallon batch, I'm limited to 6%, and just by the size of my mash tun. Mm-hmm. So it does make you get creative if you want to. But 6% gets me pretty much everything I want to
make. So, and then the last one that we have here is one of the October beers, the Cave Ridge Rye. It's a rye pale ale, and in October, it's the harvest season, so it's the fresh hop time. So this is one of our 2 fresh hops that we did for October.
Yeah, I had the Slot Galore. Was your other one?
The Slot IPA, named after the Slot Galore. This is another feature on Snoqualmie Mountain. Cave Ridge is the normal snowshoeing and climbing.
That one had a much more of a vegetal hoppy flavor from the dry or the fresh hopping. This one is much smoother. Yep. Maybe it's because of the age or.
That one was with Citra, which is more of a stronger hop. Plus, it was on an IPA backbone, so it had a lot more of hops for bittering, flavor, and aroma. The kettle hops were not just were normal pellets. Mm-hmm. It was only the Flame Out or the Whirlpool hops that we did, the wet hops.
The wet hops.
Yeah, and so it had a lot of hops in that one. And this is pretty much limited to a little bit of kettle hops for flavor and bitterness, but the Simcoe come through on the end, and I really like how Simcoe plays with the rye. So it's a rye pale.
Yeah, the piney kind of goes with the rye in a nice way.
Yeah,
nice combo.
So and there's 80% of the wet hops, as was in the slot that you tried previously.
Is this dry hopped at all, or
no
hops?
No, it's all the wet hops just went in right at the Flame Out, right during the Whirlpool at the end of the boil, and that was the only the hopping that it got, or with the wet hops.
Yeah, it's got a nice hop aroma and taste, so especially for a beer that hasn't been dry hopped.
Yeah, so I think the wet hops and the Simcoe going in right at the end.
Right, kind of hop blasting it right there at the end. It's nice. So I think you got the next question.
Oh yeah, so you have a doctorate in microbiology.
I do.
I guess two questions. How did you come about becoming a professional brewer from that, and do you think it's benefited you?
I'll answer the second one. Yes,
yeah.
Absolutely. So it's just education is key, and the more you learn, the more you know, and you can apply it. And so biochemistry, microbiology. Beer is made from a living organism, and I think we're going to touch on this later, but it's how you handle the yeast, and it's how you handle all of your ingredients, and what happens molecularly inside.
Yeah, that would seem to be a really good background going into brewing.
Yep. And how it led me to brewing, I don't know.
It was the beer that led you to brewing.
Exactly.
I was
a home brewer, and then I was fascinated with viruses and microbiology, and so I came out here to get my PhD in actually viruses and public health.
Where from?
Madison, Wisconsin. So I went from one UW to the next UW. So I studied biochemistry there. That fascinated me, but I wanted more kind of not just chemicals, but living creatures. And I don't know if you recall, I still know what to call a virus, if it's a living creature or not. But those fascinated me.
I believe that's beyond the purview of our blog.
Okay,
I believe so. If I recall right, there are people who still debate what yeast actually is, whether or not it's a virus or not.
Yes, so
there's always some contrarian.
That one I would say is not a virus, but people, yeah. So then I just did experiments, liked studying, liked learning things, and eventually I wanted to learn things in the brewery and with beer as opposed to in academia. So I just kind of went this direction when I could have gone any other direction. And it was, like you said, it was the beer brought me this way.
So speaking of beer, I noticed looking back through your beers, I didn't notice a lot of any Belgians or sours. And as a microbiologist, I kind of expected that you might have gone there. Is there a reason you haven't? Do you know too much?
I don't know enough. Actually, viruses are not equal to yeast. No. And although I did have a lot of education in yeast, I just did not practice and play with Brettanomyces or Lactobacillus or the souring agents that other breweries use to make wonderful, delicious sour beers. I love them, but it's a skill that I never developed, and I've done a couple sours with home brewing, but never really perfected it. And I don't have time to experiment here because it's a one-man operation, and so as soon as I can, I would love to get a sour arm or a Belgian arm to the brewery, but I would have to play around with it, and I want to put out a better product than just a playing around.
And I'd imagine, particularly with the sours, they take long enough to age that you don't really have anywhere to age them. So as a small operation, you're kind of limited with your capacity.
Yeah, capacity, and I don't brew enough, but that's because we don't have the space to store things. So everybody asks me, do you do a lager? No. And I'm sad about that. I do want to do a lager, but you got to store it for a month. Yeah. We just don't have the space or the equipment to...
So when most people ask that, do you mean something light in color, or do you think they really mean a lager?
People don't come in here looking for light in color. If they do, it's going to to like the Cave Ridge.
A larger brewery, perhaps, but if something is small, they normally know what
that's close to like American light lager color there.
So no, they're meaning Doppelbox or or Maibox or the lager, like a good traditional lager,
craft lager.
So with your name, Northwest Peaks, I'm assuming you're a climber. How does that tie into your beer, and how'd you start climbing? And
I am.
Tell me all about it.
Well, it's kind of, I wanted that to be the face of the brewery, and I started climbing out here in grad school. I was a backpacker before, but I just started climbing and going up mountains. Self-taught, well, not self-taught, but self-associated with friends that could teach me. Yes. And so I just started, I love the outdoors, I love getting away. It's kind of my zen time, if you will, or just to get away. Everybody needs something to do for themselves to separate from the daily activities, and the mountains were it for me. And then I just like getting to having a destination. And what better destination than top of a mountain? So I try to do alpine climbing more, kind of just try to get past that glacier, get up the mountain, and then...
So two follow-up questions. One, favorite peak in the North Cascades, and two, favorite peak that somebody who drinks too much beer can get up. I'd like to think of myself as not in the second category.
So there's so many good mountains out here, and... you can see pictures from John Skurlock on the wall, and there's a reason why they're there. But the one that is probably missing is Challenger. And after graduating, I took a solo backpacking trip onto Copper Ridge. So that's not a peak, but it's a beautiful place to go for somebody that drinks too much, as you said, or as you were asking. And just right across from the Chilliwack riverbed is this huge glacier. And I was like, I'll never make it up there. And one...
Sounds like somebody's had some of your beer out there.
Yeah. One trip, we decided to do it, and we got into the Northern Pickets at the same time. And it was just seeing that peak and that kind of in the distance, thinking that I was never going to get there, climbing it. It was a crazy climb. It's... not for the soft-hearted. It was a gorgeous climb and one of my favorites, and relatively unoptimal conditions and weather. But it was
Classic
great,
North
and
Cascades.
it's the same thing that I was like, I'd love to own a brewery, like way back in early 2000s.
But
it'll never happen. It's kind of like, hey, now we're here. And same with Readout, actually. Had the same thought process and Readout. So I'd say those two have probably been my favorite climbs.
Just talking about making it happen. Your whole brewery and your tap room setup here really seems like you just made it happen. Like, you found the space, you found some brewing equipment, you really are. Like, this is really cool. You have this little space here, you got your setup, you have the tap room.
Yeah, for better or worse, is what it is. Yeah. And, a lot of people would want a little more polishing of it, and then other people kind of embrace it. It's like, yeah, this is great. This guy is more about the beer and more about the climbing than he is about the facade.
Exactly. And you're making it happen. I think it's really cool. You've got you got a really nice space here. You're making good beer.
Thanks.
So, yeah, no problem. Do you have any tips for homebrewers, current or aspiring, to improve the quality of their beer?
Yeah, focus on what you don't like doing. And no one likes to hear that, but the two big things is sanitation and cleaning. No one likes cleaning, and no one likes not touching it. Just, they don't want to do it. But if you get an infection, your beer is done. So the cleanliness, and sanitation for one. The second of which is a lot of brewers avoid this at all costs because they don't see it. It's the yeast health. And I argue that I tell people that a good fermentation can make the most mediocre beer good.
Or conversely.
You could have the best process and the best ingredients and the best recipe. A bad fermentation will destroy that beer.
It'll taste like butterscotch.
It'll taste like butter. It'll taste like anything but good beer. Yeah. So
bananas, whatever.
Yeah, and a lot of brewers do not think about that because they can't manipulate the yeast, or they don't know how to, or they don't think about it. So aerate your wort, aerate, and then make sure that you've got a good, viable yeast crop and a good fermentation. So those are the two things that I focus on when talking to people, just because a lot of homebrewers don't want to do that, and so, but those are the two things that can kill a recipe. I mean, I don't care if you use pale malt versus ESB malt versus different brands of malt. That's not as big as a bad fermentation, or is not going to be as detrimental as a bad fermentation.
Temperature,
it makes a lot of sense. The
difference of a beer fermenting at 80 degrees to 70 degrees is a huge temperature difference, or flavor difference.
Oh yes, and that would 80 degrees would probably.
I see people at the supply store weighing out, like with a digital thing, like the amount of grain, and then I know they're not monitoring their temperatures at all. And the latter has a much bigger effect than they realize. So.
Right.
So is there anything else you'd like to share with us before we close? Tell us about your brewing process, or...
we're going back to the CSB. It's called the Mountain Beers, and we're always looking for people to come in and join up. So if they wanted to, that's great. We do 2 different seasonal beers every single month, and it's kind of you can do 2 hours a month and get both of them.
Do you deliver, or is it a pickup?
It's a pickup. We're trying to figure out. There's growing pains with everything, and we're trying to figure out how to make it much more convenient for the end user.
Most people can make it here once a month.
Once a month, yeah. And and as a subscriber, everything's pre-filled, and so we don't have to be open technically with the taps flowing. So it's just kind of an exchange. So if you can make it during the day, we're normally here brewing during the day or cleaning or doing some fun thing, and we'll just do an exchange really quickly for you.
I'm glad to hear the cleaning's fun for somebody.
Yeah. It's called insurance, right? Yeah. So, I'm lucky to have actually Carrie working with me, so he's doing great right now. So he's actually the brainchild behind the pecan beer. We kind of that was our first November. We kind of sat down and both worked through the 4 different recipes, and we each brought a spice one and a normal one to the table, and then we kind of hashed through both of our recipes and kind of jointly picked one of our 2 spices and the opposite normal.
Yeah. Coming up with the recipe may be the most fun part, but the sanitation and yeast starters are the most important part.
Exactly. So
anyway, if you want to find us, you can find us here on Facebook at Northwest Beer Nerd Chronicles. And until next time, drink beer Northwest, because beer works. Cheers.
Cheers.
Drink Northwest.
so less. Your fist pressed up against the glass. A curse to check you